In conjunction with Invest in Others, Advisorpedia, Redtail Technology, and Proudmouth, we present Empowering Others, a podcast series of stories from people within the financial services community who are working to make a difference in people's lives. Our hope is that you will listen, learn, and be inspired to find a way to use your gifts, whatever they may be, to help others.
Finding and truly discovering your purpose is difficult. As humans, we want to leave an impression on the planet, but more precisely on the people and communities we live in. Welcome back to Empowering Others, brought to you by Redtail Technologies, this amazing podcast where we're working with Invest in Others to focus on the change makers in the financial services industry who are doing well and doing good at the same time. I'm Matt Ackermann from Integrated Partners, and today I'm excited to talk purpose with Carrie Coghill of Coghill Investment Strategies. Carrie was honored in 2018 by Invest in Others with its Catalyst Award for the incredible work she's doing to shine a spotlight on women's health research. Carrie, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to join you, Matt.
I am really excited for today's conversation. Carrie, I'm going to start big. What inspired you to want to focus on women's health?
Yeah. Well, what inspired me was that I unfortunately had a very good friend. Her name was Robbie Deitch. Her husband, Joe Deitch, is actually the chairman of our broker-dealer. And she was a very close friend and the most vibrant person you could ever imagine. And she had ovarian cancer, which was shocking, and passed away from it. And that really led me to want to understand, how can this happen to such a passionate, lively woman? And that was the catalyst that really drove me to learn more at that point about women's cancer. It opened the door to learn a lot more.
Has volunteering always been part of your DNA? Has it been something you prior to doing this, something you wanted to be a part of?
No, I think that I never thought about it. I was a single mother for most of my daughter's life, and I was in the financial services industry. It's always changing. And I was focused on raising my daughter and my career. I think that one of the unique aspects of what we all do as financial advisors is that we help people. And you do get to a point, or at least I got to a point in my life where, giving back became important. I wasn't raised in an environment where, my parents volunteered or did any of that. And I think maybe had I had it earlier in life, I would have been more, driven to do it. But it's just something that evolves. And as a financial advisor, we inherently are helping people. And then when you're struck with something, and people always ask me, how do I get involved? If I want to volunteer and I want to give back, where do I start? And it really starts with your passion. What are you really driven? Where is your intellectual interest? What really bothers you? And focus your attentions there.
So I can see how the passion is there for this, but why research? I mean, when you look at an issue like ovarian cancer, there's a lot of other ways to get involved. Why did you focus in on research?
Yeah, it's a great question because, anytime when you're dealing with medical research anyway, it's about saving lives at the end of the day. And it's really about changing the trajectory of someone's health. And the only way you get there is to understand the body, understand research. And the thing that was unbelievable to me as I started to look at, well, how can someone get ovarian cancer? Why don't we know what the markers are? Why don't we have a test? Why is it that when women are diagnosed, it's too late? It's a silent killer. And what I learned was that at that point, which was back around 2010, 2011, when I started to get involved, is that 13 cents of every research dollar at that time went towards women's health. So we as women represent 50% of the population. I always say 100% of the future because men and women, boys and girls are born to women. And but yet 13 cents of every research dollar was going to women's health. And then to make matters even worse, a lot of research that's done is actually done on men or had been done on men and then applied to women. We're different. Physiologically, we know that women's bodies are different than men's bodies. So why is it that we are doing research on men and applying it to women? It's really interesting, Matt. I just finished a lunch today, and it was with the Chuck Noll Foundation here in Pittsburgh. Chuck Noll was our coach for decades, I guess. And the reason we had the lunch is that they study concussions, and they're starting to say, wait a second, we need to figure out how concussions affect and present and are healed in women. So they're looking to do some sort of collaboration, because this old model of doing research on men and applying it to women, it doesn't work.
No, certainly doesn't. Cancer and cancer research is close to my heart. We lost my mom 8 years ago to cancer, and she went to doctors very early and said something's wrong. And doctors told her, maybe you just don't have a high pain tolerance. And she's like, I had 8 children. I know my body, something is wrong. And, eventually they found she had a tumor the size of a football in her chest. And it is still staggering to me that it took multiple doctors and a lot of diagnoses before they got to that. And what would have happened if they had done this research better sooner? Could we have had even more years with her? So the work you're doing is impacting this planet in a huge way. And I just want to thank you for that, because I just think that research in general gets overshadowed sometimes. There's a lot of amazing organizations out there, but research needs to happen so that, we can get better in the future. It's like that analogy of the plumber. The first thing they do when they walk in is they assess the situation and turn the water off before they start, mopping things up. And I think that's really important, everything you're doing.
Right. Thank you. And I'm so sorry to hear about your mother, and those stories are happen every day. And research is really the key. It's the key to having the understanding. Our scientific director at Mcgee, Yoel Sadovsky, always says, we're in the knowledge business. This is about the knowledge of what causes disease. How can we prevent disease? How can we have diagnostics that can help us so that we have a cancer-free world someday? Or, prematurity isn't an issue. And no couple ever has to go without having a baby because we've resolved those fertility issues. So the only way you get there is through research. And it's a lot, because especially with medical research, the returns are long-term. Will I ever see a cure or, a diagnostic for ovarian cancer so no one ever has to go through this again? I hope so. And I really hope so. And I think that we are really close, but, maybe not. And as I give money, my own resources to study ovarian cancer, I have to accept that. I know that future generations are going to be better off because of the work that we're doing today.
Now, you mentioned Mcgee. Tell me a little about the Magee-Womens Research Institute and the work you're doing.
Yeah, so the Magee-Womens Research Institute is located in Pittsburgh. It is the largest women-specific research institute in the country when we take a look at NIH, National Institute of Health funding. And what our focus is, it is one institute, one building that houses women's research on a variety of different levels. And the way that we look at it is from, we want to look at 9 months to 90 years. What is the continuum of health for a woman? And there are so many social aspects of this when you look at women and parenting and grandparenting and everything else. But it's also things like, if you have high blood pressure when you're pregnant, what does that do to you later in life? Are you more likely to have heart disease because of something like that? So, there's so much fascinating research that happens. I think when people think about a women's health research center, a lot of times they think about babies, and obviously that has a lot to do with it. But, it is fertility issues. It is, one of the things that we are working hard to solve the problem on is childhood cancer, that when a child goes through chemotherapy, if it happens before puberty, they can become infertile. So what happens if you harvest their stem cells before chemo, and then after chemo, once they've healed the cancer, reintroduce those stem cells? Will those children grow up and be able to have kids? And I think it's 2 years ago now, the first baby monkey was born through doing this. So people are coming from all over the country, and we're training people all over the country, other scientists and physicians, to be able to do this. So, the Magee-Womens Research Institute is really about women's health. It's not just specific to babies. And that collaboration that happens, and I was having this conversation today about like concussions, the collaboration of things that we might know, like what causes postpartum depression. And if you can look at physiologically at this and identify what's happening in the brain, in the blood, in your body, is there an application when we look at why young girls, after they suffer a sports concussion, have depression? So it's the collaboration. It's that, I'm studying fertility, but what I'm finding is actually applied in heart disease for women. So, the Institute itself is really, it's really a great place to be. And the physicians are amazing. They're just, heaven sent. I was surprised to learn that it was literally in my backyard, to think that this was my interest, and, right down the street, there we have it.
And it's grown. I mean, it starts off, you're looking at the issue of ovarian cancer, but all of these diseases have touch points. And by having doctors in one place thinking this way, they're able to help each other's research really flourish. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. And what you learn about research too, like I've had people say, well, my mother was treated at Brigham Women's, so I'm going to give money to Brigham Women's. And what I continuously have to remind people is, if you're really interested in research and actually helping people, not that you wouldn't give to that institution, but you need to look at where the research is happening that supports the passion and the disease that you've been touched by, or that you're interested in changing. And, medical health research has no geographic boundaries. So if I'm sitting in Boston or in San Francisco or somewhere else, and I want to focus on ovarian cancer, then I want to look for a research center that has excellence in ovarian cancer. So, that's another thing that I think people don't necessarily think about when it comes to giving to medical research in general. And our institute and all, like the way they function, they have partnerships. So, we have partnerships with other researchers around the world.
You must see the impact in action all the time. You must see, the people whose lives are being changed and altered because they're receiving treatment, they're receiving remedies and research that perhaps, even 5-10 years ago, it seemed like a pipe dream to be able to give this kind of impact and help these people. You must see it every day.
Yeah, I do. And I'm unfortunately seeing it very close to home right now. One of our family members was just diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. And, fortunately, I'm like, okay, I can help on this one. And, we got her in to see the doctors, and, she just is so appreciative. But where it really matters is because we're a research center, she's now able to get into a clinical trial that she wouldn't have been able to get into. So, it's seeing that, it's seeing, It's definitely the research, but I also kind of emphasize how special these people are. Her oncologist and her doctor, they're just amazing people. And when she was going through some treatments and they were putting a port in for her to receive her chemotherapy, the nurses were singing to her to take her mind off of it. That's the kind of stuff that matters. And making, like, really understanding deeply about the patient and what the patient's going through and what the family's going through and what we can be doing to help support the family. So I am really grateful for what, what research is happening. And, health touches all of our lives. I am very fortunate that, the things that I deal with during the day basically are the two most important things for people, dealing with their money and dealing with their health. Now, I can't take credit for the health, but being an advocate, I think that, being an advocate for whatever it is you're passionate about, and in this case, it's medical research and women's specific, that matters.
But also, because of your knowledge of money and finance, you brought a new perspective here to the Research Institute as well, and got them, really to focus on fundraising. Talk a little bit about that. To me, I think it's incredible because, when you can follow those dollars, you can see real change happen.
Yes. So, when I joined, anytime someone's looking to get involved, I mean, you have to start somewhere, and it's usually with volunteering. And I was fortunate enough to volunteer my time as a board member at the Research Institute, which then evolved to being chair of the board. And during the time that I've been serving, we were able to close out a $100 million campaign. Which matters, obviously, because it's all about money. I mean, I think we've all experienced this over the last 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for people that say, how could they create a COVID vaccine so quickly? Well, when money is not an issue, and you take all of the smartest people in the field and put them on one project, amazing things can happen. So it's the same thing for all other kinds of research. And raising the money and having the support and looking at, I'm a finance person. I don't know. My last health class was probably in 7th grade. Like, what do I know? How can I help and sit on a board? Well, you bring up a good point, Matt. It's that bringing the diversity of thought around the table and being a business person and starting to look at the organization really kind of as a business. What would we do? How do we promote it? How do we get the rest of the world to know that we're the #1 research institute in the country in terms of our funding? Scientists are amazing people, but they're scientists. They're supposed to be doing science. They're not supposed to be trying to come up with marketing strategies.
Yeah.
And, they're very helpful on the fundraising side. They will give their time all day long to help raise money. But bringing that dynamic to the board is really important. And I would just, advise listeners out there that when you're passionate about something, don't sell yourself short and think, oh, well, I'm a lawyer. What input could I possibly have sitting on a university board or sitting on a medical research board? Diversity of thought is very important.
It's funny because I immediately put on my content and marketing hat and start to say, wow, what I would do is show and tell the pictures this way, tell a story this way with video, get a bunch of people inspired. So you, as the money person, can help gather those dollars so the scientist can help make change happen. It's that domino effect of diversity of thought. I love that point. That's fantastic. And, as chair, when you sit on these boards, what are some of the biggest challenges you face in order to get real change to happen?
Well, my first challenge is in understanding what the scientists are saying. And they're really good at it, but I sit with my phone and I Google under the table, what did that word mean? They're so smart. But honestly, I think the biggest challenge really with any board is that you're taking people that are experts. So we're taking scientists, and we as board members are doing our job in terms of, just like you said, coming up with marketing strategies and so forth. But we absolutely have to have 100% buy-in from the people that are doing the work. So it's interesting, as we went through a rebrand process recently, scientists are very thoughtful people. So they may look at a marketing piece and they might pick out one word. Like we might say, we're the best at whatever it is. And they're going to say, well, but do we really know that we're the best? It's like, we need to do some research on that. So, it's kind of bridging that gap and helping them to understand the best way to to present. And I think as a board member, it's really important to understand that dynamic, and don't force an issue. This is about collaboration. This is about, I hate to sound so formal, but it's about negotiation, right? If they're not comfortable with it, we can't do it. So now how do we try to bring them along, and how do they try to bring us along? That dynamic, it is really important on any board. It is really easy for things to go south. It is really easy for one contingent of people to say, I want it this way, and another contingent to say, I want it this way. How do you bridge that? And as a board member, I tell people all the time, it's not about getting your way. There's going to be many times where you don't get your way. It's about consensus. It's about, awareness, bringing people along, being sure you're articulating the whys and the hows and the importance. So I think at Mcgee, the biggest gap is that, just think about it. Like, they're scientists, they're researchers. They want to prove everything. That's their job. Where, like, in the business world, we're a little more entrepreneurial, and we're a little more willing to go out on a limb and say something that maybe, not that it's false, but, we want to get people excited. So I think that was probably the heaviest lift more recently, was in the rebranding, because you're talking about a subject that, that they're not necessarily focused on.
So when you hit these hurdles or challenges, when you're sitting on a board meeting and you're Googling under the desk and maybe you don't feel as heard as often, what motivates you to keep going? It can be hard. You got a day job, you're working hard, you got this going on. What motivates you? You talked about, that initial motivation and kind of inspiration of your friend who had passed away and lost her battle with ovarian cancer. But what motivates you now to keep this drive going?
I think just seeing the work that's being done and knowing how much the organization is counting on you. It's a responsibility. And, the dynamics of managing a board and governance of a board and differences, that's all part of it. And that's to be accepted. And when those challenging times happen, and they don't really happen too frequently. If anything, it's more logistics about, like, the operations of, hiring or something like that. But it really, I think any nonprofit, and this is why I say it's so important to be passionate about where you're giving your time, because sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes there's turmoil. Sometimes things go wrong. And if you're going to live up to the responsibility that the organization is entrusting in you, you have to be passionate. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Otherwise, I would be like, oh, I've got other things to do. So it grows. It really does.
So what's next? You've accomplished so many great things. You've done amazing things for research and women's research specifically, but what's next for you, for the Institute? Where do you go from here?
I'm so glad I had this lunch today, because it really helps to frame, like, what's next. I'm a believer in strategic byproducts. So my daughter, when she got out of college and she was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I'm like, you're not looking for what you're going to do with the rest of your life. You're going to look for what you're doing next. Like, just let it happen. Because, and if you do have a lofty goal, when I graduated from college, I wanted to be a CPA, and I had to work my way through college. So I actually got my first job at a brokerage firm. I never became a CPA. The strategic byproduct of that job on my path to that goal was that I ended up loving this industry. So you have to be open and you have to be flexible, and I'm open to that. I think that there are times where I feel like some of my extracurricular activities have run their course. And for me personally, Mcgee is my passion. It's just a staple of what I do. I do sit on a university board that will be coming to an end. And in replacing that, I'm now on a cultural board on the Carnegie Museums and the Andy Warhol Museum. And that's just driven, I'll be totally honest with you, I love this city. I think Pittsburgh is like the best city to live in this country. It's for a variety of reasons. And these cultural centers drive our region. So, what's next for me is kind of what it is that sparks me. And even this conversation today at lunch, like thinking about things I never thought about before. I never thought about how a young girl playing lacrosse at 13 having a concussion may affect her life for the rest of her life. So, it's just to kind of connect the dots. The best advice I have to people is, remain flexible, keep your mind open. The biggest challenge is just not overcommitting.
If you taught me anything today, it's the journey is never a straight line, but with great passion and purpose, amazing things happen. Carrie, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for making some time today.
Oh, thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And that's been this episode of Empowering Others. We look forward to you joining us next time. For Invest in Others, for Redtail Technologies and Advisorpedia, I'm Matt Ackermann. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We hope you are inspired to go out and make a difference in your community. For more information on Invest in Others, please visit investinothers.org. Thank you to Redtail Technologies for sponsoring these important conversations. To learn more about how Redtail can help you streamline your prospect and client communications, please visit redtailtechnology.com.